Hello, good morning. Welcome to Ask the Expert, an award-winning daily series from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. If you have any questions, please do ask them in the comments of the live feed. If you need any more advice, then please join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook, where you've got accountants and business experts on hand 24/7. During the live session, we will be running a poll, so please do engage with it, and I'll reveal the results at the end. So I'm Toby Mildon. I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant. I work with HR directors and senior business leaders to make sure that their workforce reflects the diversity of the nation, and also to create a culture within the organization that allows everybody to thrive, regardless of what background or circumstances you come from. Today, I'm going to be discussing how I believe businesses should be responding to world crises. In particular, I'm going to be making reference to the situation in Ukraine. So, any opinions that I express in this process are my own and do not reflect the stance of Intuit QuickBooks. So, in light of the situation in Ukraine, I think it's more important than ever for businesses to review how they respond to the crisis. And as I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant, in particular, looking at the impact that world events have on the inclusivity of people working in your organization. So I've come up with sort of five key areas that business leaders and people working in HR should be thinking about in particular. So first of all, there needs to be a zero tolerance on discrimination. I've spoken with several colleagues over the last few weeks, and there have been instances of downright bullying and harassment and discrimination and things like that. Comments made on the shop floor or the factory floor, like go back to where you came from, that kind of thing. And there needs to be a zero tolerance policy led from the top of the organization to stamp out that kind of behavior. But also, we need to be aware of what we call microaggressions. And microaggressions are those kind of small bits of behavior that are often unintentional, often unconsciously communicated to people. So it could be like, that particular look when somebody enters a meeting room, for example, that makes them feel that that they don't belong, or that there's something going on. So that this policy has to be driven from the top of the organization. It has to be made very clear from senior leaders that this is not to be tolerated at all, and to create an environment in the organization based on respect. The second key area is really around looking after people's mental health and well-being. Um, Anxiety and depression are the most common forms of mental health distress within the organization. There could be people working in your team who are maybe from Russia or Ukraine or Eastern Europe, where they are anxious about people at home or what's going on at home. And it's about really putting in the support mechanisms to support those people. So you might already have mental health support in place, like an employee assistance program or a mental health champion within the organization. But if you don't, there are plenty of support systems that you can direct staff to. So even if you're a small organization, there are employee assistance programs that you can utilize, or you can get in touch with mental health organizations like the Samaritans, for example, or Mind, the mental health charity. But the events going on in Russia and Ukraine, are not just triggering for people from that part of the world. It can be triggering for a lot of people. It could be, that you might have, for example, somebody who is a refugee working in your organization from another part of the world, and they're seeing refugees fleeing Ukraine, and the events are, triggering for them. But also, for myself as born in England, very much a British person, the world events are really triggering for me as well. Just anxious about what's happening in the world, and whether events could come over to the UK, for instance. So it's really important that we look out for the mental health and well-being of our staff. The third point I want to make is that we need to understand the complexity of identity. So, for instance, somebody could be born in Russian, but very much identify as British also. So they have this kind of like dual identity, where there might be this conflict between their Russian identity and their British identity, for example, or they could be an LGBT individual living in the UK, and where being an LGBT in Russia, for example, is very much frowned upon. So it might be that there's a conflict of identity there as well. The next point that I want to make really is about I suppose, the importance of impartiality at work. My personal opinion, and as I said at the beginning, this is not the opinion of Intuit QuickBooks. This is my personal opinion, is that what's going on in Ukraine is very much, Putin's invasion. It's not the Russian people's invasion. But you might be in a situation at work where you've got people with different perspectives, different opinions. And when I talk to my clients about creating a culture of inclusion or respect in the organization, it's about giving people that space to be able to air their opinions and their perspectives on things going on in the world. And you have to hear people out, and if necessary, respectfully disagree with them, but create that space where you have that kind of impartiality and you can hear people's thoughts and opinions on things. I think what's going on in Ukraine and Russia is just a reminder to my clients, actually, that organizations, and if you're running your own business, you have to be constantly scanning the environment for what's going on in the world, and how those external forces can impact your internal culture or your internal organization. So if ever you've done a business course, no doubt you've heard of the PESTLE analysis. So PESTLE, it's a PESTLE. It's an acronym for 5 different external forces. So political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental. And it's really important that you sit down on a regular basis and just kind of run through that list and kind of just check in with yourself and your co-workers on the impact that those 5 forces might have on your organization. So obviously there's a political force right now going on in Ukraine, for example. And there's been an environmental force for a very long time, talking about climate change and things like that. And then that's also brought around economic forces as well, with sanctions being made and things like that. So it's really important that you kind of just sit down and assess those forces, but have a diversity and inclusion lens on it. So do any of those forces bring around inequality, for example? Do any of those forces affect the kind of inclusive culture or a culture of respect within your organization? And therefore, how can you respond in time to those? The final point that I want to make before taking your questions is really to know when and how to take a stance. There's been lots of organizations who have very publicly said that they are pulling operations out of Russia. For example, Spotify said that they are closing down operations in Russia. However, they're keeping the service very much going because they believe in the freedom of flow of information. So if you are in that situation, think about the kind of the impact that has on Russian and Ukrainian colleagues. How can you support Russian colleagues with that decision being made, because there could be perhaps financial implications on them or how they support their families. So hopefully that's given you some food for thought on how events going on in the world might be affecting diversity and inclusion within your organization. So I'm going to switch over to taking your questions now. So thank you very much for submitting those. If you, please do continue sending your questions in. So the first question is from Sheila on Facebook Messenger. So Sheila says, we have a new starter who is hearing impaired. I want to ensure that his experience with us is accessible, but my main concern is over Zoom calls. How should I encourage my team to accommodate him without putting him on the spot? Yeah, that's a really good question, Sheila. So first of all, I think there's a few things that you can do. So first of all, I think you need to sit down and have a conversation with this new starter about what his preferences are, because obviously there's a whole spectrum of hearing impairments. So somebody might lip read, somebody might use British Sign Language, somebody might having a hearing impairment in one ear. So people with hearing impairments are obviously very diverse and unique. So I think the first thing is just sit down with this particular individual, ask him or her, ask him what his preferences are, how he likes to communicate, what challenges or difficulties he has, and what makes life easier for him. So if you're using technology like Zoom, you can enable subtitles. So if this particular person does like to use subtitles, maybe send a note around to your team or your colleagues about making sure that subtitles are enabled on Zoom when you have meetings. I think Zoom has just updated its functionality to make it easier to turn subtitles on and off. It was a bit of a pain before, but I think they have improved that functionality. I think if you also first of all, sit down with the individual to find out what their preferences are, how they like to communicate, what they need. You can even ask them how they would like that to be communicated to the rest of the team or the organization. So it could be that they say, put 5 tips into an email and circulate that around, for example, or something like that. If you want some additional support, it might be worth getting in touch with an organization like the Business Disability Forum. So they are an organization that support employers employing disabled people. And I know they've got loads of information like manager guides and things like that. So hopefully that helps. The next question is from Claire on Twitter DM. So how can we use technology to improve diversity in the workplace? Cool, that's a really good question, Claire. I'm really interested in tech actually, because before I got into diversity and inclusion, I used to work as a project manager at the BBC on iPlayer, and I was an IT consultant and all things like that. So I do like working in the tech space. And actually in my book, Inclusive Growth, that I wrote, there's a whole chapter on how technology can help organizations with diversity and inclusion. Selfless plug here, but go and check out my book, Inclusive Growth, on Amazon to read that particular chapter. So technology can help in a whole number of ways. I think there's different ways of looking at this. First of all, there's technology that can help us kind of internally within the organization, so giving us information and data. So you could use an app, for example, called like In Chorus, which enables staff to anonymously log incidents of microaggressions or disrespect, as I mentioned in the kind of the opening 10 minutes. And that gives you a heat map of what's going on in the organization, who this behavior is being directed to, where it's happening in the organization. So you can take targeted action. So there's all sorts of apps like they're out there. There's obviously, we talk about things like bias within the recruitment process. So there's all sorts of technology that can help reduce bias. So it could be looking at the language that's being used in your job ads or your job descriptions. So for example, there's an app called Textio, so text.io, and you can just copy and paste your job description or your job ad into the text box that they give you, and it will give you like a red, amber, green score, and it tells you what words need improving, because some words attract people with more kind of masculine or feminine traits, for example. So if you use language like we're high octane, go getters, that kind of thing, that can be IT ninjas, using that kind of language can be off-putting for some people. So that there's that technology that can help. I think the other thing that we have to think about is the accessibility of technology. I did a talk at a conference yesterday, and I was really shocked. About 98% of people in the audience have not checked their website for accessibility. So if you've got if people apply for jobs through your website and it doesn't work with say a screen reader, which is what somebody who's blind uses, then they won't be able to apply to come and work for your company. So you need to check your company for accessibility, your website, sorry, for accessibility against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They're a kind of universally set of accessibility standards for websites and apps and things like that. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can do in technology. I could go on forever, actually. Do reach out to me if you want to chat further, because I can signpost you to some really useful people who can help you with that if that's a particular area of interest for your organization. So Marisa on Twitter says, you mentioned we should challenge behaviours that could be seen as discrimination. How do we do this in a way that doesn't single people out as well? Cool. So Marisa, we often talk about sort of calling out and calling in behaviour. And I think the first point that I want to make is that you need to do it in such a way that is comfortable for you and fits in with your kind of style and personality. So when we talk about calling out behaviour, it's calling out sort of signs of discrimination or harassment or bullying or disrespect when we see it or soon after we see it. Now, some people are quite bold and confident, and they're quite happy to kind of just say it in the moment and just say, Joe, that comment that you just made, could be seen as racist or misogynistic or homophobic or whatever. But some people find that really difficult. And it might be that you want to, after the event happens, is kind of do it discreetly with that particular person in your particular style. So I'm really not a confrontational person, so I would find that very difficult myself. But I would want to kind of have like a chat on the side with somebody if I notice it, or if I feel like I can't go to that individual directly, go and speak to somebody else. So it could be like your manager or somebody in HR, particularly if you notice that there's a particular threat, theme, or trend going on, if it's happening consistently over time. But my main kind of tip really is to do it in your personal, in a way that feels comfortable for you. So Will on Facebook Messenger says, considering how stressful the news is right now, do you think it's best to just ban my employees from talking about the situation in Ukraine? That way they avoid accidentally upsetting others who may be feeling anxious about it. So yeah, it's a really good point, Will. I don't think you are able to ban it outright, if I'm honest, as an employer in the organisation. What I think is important is that you kind of create safe spaces for people to be able to talk about it. I think that's more powerful and empowering than just kind of trying to park the issue or put it on one side or stop people talking about it. I think getting people to talk about it is actually more helpful. And you can create those safe spaces, or as I said earlier, sort of create those like escalation channels that people can use. So you could send out a message saying something along the lines of, I appreciate that, world events could be very triggering for a lot of people right now for all sorts of reasons. Not just people coming from Russia or Ukraine or the Eastern European area of the world. It could be triggering for other people. It could trigger all sorts of different traumas that people have had in life, that kind of thing. And therefore, these are the support mechanisms that we've put in place for you, whether that's having somebody in the organization that you can go and have a confidential talk to, for example, that kind of thing, or whether you use a third party employee assistance program. Even for small and medium sized businesses, there are employee assistance programs that you can use that are quite economical to use. It's not just something that big, huge corporations use. So it's just have a Google, just a quick Google today for employee assistance programs for small businesses. There are options out there. So Arthur on Facebook says, we are still a relatively small business, so we don't have things such as employee assistance programs or mental health first aiders. How can I implement some of these things in a tight budget? Good point, Arthur. I think, as I just said, there are economical employee assistance programs out there for small and medium-sized businesses. You kind of do it as a pay-as-you-go model. They're fairly low cost, so it's worth just having a Google of those. But there's also, I think, just there's a lot that you can do kind of cheaply or free. So, for example, just regularly reminding staff about mental health and well-being, and then just signposting them to existing resources. So it could be that people can ring up the Samaritans or contact a local mental health charity or go and talk to their GP if they're really concerned. So that I think that's something you can do on a regular basis. So there are things that you can do like that. Raul on Instagram DM says, how does the concept of employee wellbeing change when we are operating with a team of employees or working remotely? Yeah, this is a really good point, Raul. I think things have shifted over the last couple of years. I think there are employees who are feeling isolated, working from home. They want to have that social connection. We are social beings at the end of the day, and work actually plays a really important role in our relationships and social connections, and it can be really kind of isolating for people. We've seen an increase in, for example, instances of domestic violence and abuse, and obviously that has a severe impact on people's health and well-being. And so I think over the last year, particularly, we have seen a big impact on employee well-being and also physical well-being as well. People just working from home, not getting out as much, not doing the kind of those daily activities that we often didn't really consider to be exercise. For example, like walking to go and catch the bus. If your commute is going from your bedroom to your kitchen rather than from your house to the bus stop, people are missing out on those kind of like that kind of daily activity. And I think and I have spoken to clients who have noticed that yes, their staff are suffering from that kind of physical impact as well, and also people working from home not having the right setup. So they kind of got like musculoskeletal issues as well because they don't have the right desk or the right screen or the right chair, that kind of thing. So employers are having to respond to that, unfortunately, by helping people get better. Eve on Instagram says, I'm all for us being as impartial at work as possible. However, on some topics, employees and customers often expect you to take a principled stand. How could we or should we go about doing this? So I think, first of all, you need to just, as an organization, agree what your particular stance is on a particular topic, and go with that. It's a bit, I'm not really sure how I can elaborate on that any further, really. But I think, it's really important that you do hear out your employees and your customers to find out what their, I suppose, what their expectations are. And then you can kind of manage the communications or messages with that. So I've got a message here from Joel on Twitter, DM. So Joel says, I'm a cis white man, and I've been asked to lead a presentation to colleagues about diversity and inclusion. Am I the best person to host this? And if yes, how do I overcome my imposter syndrome? Yeah, this is a really great question, Joel. It's something I come across quite a lot. I think you are the right person to do it. So first of all, I think the kind of experiencing this imposter syndrome is very normal. I was talking to a client recently. Well, I say recently, it was last summer actually, during LGBT History Month, and he was saying, as a straight man, who am I to be talking about, LGBT issues in the organization? And I said to him, as a senior leader in this particular organization, you need to be walking the talk. You are the custodian of the culture for your organization, and people look up to you. So unfortunately, you have to lean into that awkwardness and talk about this. And it was quite interesting, and he did a good job of it. And I think, as you sort of describe in your text as a kind of cis white man, I think it's really important that people who find themselves in the kind of the majority group in the organization, who hold privilege and power within an organization, become allies, because that when we become allies for diversity and inclusion, that's when we can really kind of push the agenda forward. And we shouldn't just kind of lean on people who are in the minority group. So from an ethnic minority background or LGBT background or having a disability or long-term health condition, that kind of thing, to try and drive change in an organization or in society. So I think, I'm pretty sure that you'll do a good job. I would say, get some support around you. So build like a little mini network of people that you can just have conversations in confidence with, where you can explore things that might be a bit awkward or difficult, where they're not going to judge you, and you can explore that without fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. By all means, reach out to me through my website or LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to have a half an hour phone call with you to talk about what you want to do in your presentation and that kind of thing. So please do reach out to me. So the poll results have just come in. So the question that we asked you was, does your business think about inclusion in its crisis management plan? So 20% of you said yes, 20% of you said no, and 60% of you said you're not sure. So I think that's really interesting. It doesn't surprise me, if I'm honest. I think obviously a lot of organizations do some, crisis management planning, should things go wrong. But what they don't often do is have a diversity and inclusion lens over it. So there might be a people element to it. So it might be, if a particular event happens, what's the knock-on effect in terms of our people? will people be able to get to work? Will they be able to do their work, log on to, the computer system or whatever it is? But they don't often have this kind of diversity and inclusion lens over it. So I think my kind of one tip really is to, if you are responsible for crisis management planning or just basic planning if something goes wrong, just think about what impact could that have on the representation of people in your organization. That's diversity, or on inclusivity. So in particular, respect. So thank you all for tuning in today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, please do feel free to message me through LinkedIn or visit my website, which is www.mildon.co.uk. A reminder that if you need any more advice, then please join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. You've got accountants and business experts on hand 24/7. Ask the Experts next show is on Monday. It's celebrating its 2-year anniversary, reliving some of the best moments. Hosted by accountant and founder of Bofix, Aaron Patrick, and featuring several experts from the show. Make sure that you are there to say goodbye. I've really enjoyed answering your questions today. Have a great day. Thank you very much.